Welcome back to the Play by Play Podcast YouTube channel, where today we are reacting to another big time move that is happening in the NBA, and that is Billy Donovan, the former now head coach of the Chicago Bulls, is choosing to step down from the Bulls organization. I wanted to talk about this topic in particular because, in my opinion, this offseason now, especially with a head coaching vacancy, especially with a general manager vacancy, especially with now having potentially two top 16 draft picks in this year's NBA draft, which is pointing out to be probably one of the best NBA draft classes that we've seen probably in the last decade or two. This to me is the most make or break offseason this year for the Chicago Bulls and will probably dictate how this team ends up looking for over the next 5 to 8 years. But really quick, before we hop into all of that, I know this has been a very, very long intro already. I want to thank you guys so much for all of your support recently on the podcast. The last NBA mock draft video that we posted has over 5,000 views, guys. It is the most viewed video on the channel, and we are now almost nearing 300 total subscribers. So I want to thank you guys so much. Let's continue to kill it down below in the comments, in the likes, with sharing the video, and of course, with subscribing. So make sure to be encouraged. Go down below, do all of that. And like always, I also want to encourage you guys all to follow us on all social medias, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You will get to see my latest reactions to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will also never miss for whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. Now, without further ado, guys, I'm going to quit boring you with this long intro, and I'm just going to go ahead and hop straight into it. So, yes, like I said at the beginning of the video, Billy Donovan has stepped down as the Bulls NBA head coach after around 5 or 6 seasons and with only one real playoff appearance. And I think, when it comes to Billy Donovan and the job that he really did with the Chicago Bulls, I think that there are various people that you could realistically blame this on. I think that you could put a lot of the blame on some of the Bulls' shortcomings over the past couple of seasons on Billy Donovan. I don't feel like he's realistically done a great job at developing a lot of the Chicago Bulls' young talent. Patrick Williams was really his first major project when he first entered this team when he came in, and his development has really slowed down very, very quickly early on in his career. And Pat Williams at this point has become a guy that is just not very versatile with the way that he can realistically move. He doesn't shoot the basketball very well. He's not really a solid ball handler. He really is the same player that he was coming out of Florida State back at around 2021, I believe, where he was very, very raw offensively still and was really just a lockdown defending type rebounding guy that realistically wasn't going to get substantial play time in the starting lineup of an NBA franchise. There's other guys as well, one including Noah Sengeh, who for some reason did not get a single game played this year at the NBA level, who was a lottery pick for them the previous season. Yes, there have been some highlights for some younger guys and whatnot. Matas Buzelis definitely had a really, really solid year this year. But overall, I just feel like he didn't do a great job at really leading and developing what was a really, really young team. Now, to counteract that, I don't think that the Bulls front office did a very great job at drafting players in the first place. Patrick Williams wasn't a great pick. I don't think that Sengeh was a really great pick. Those two alone were supposed to be two key cornerstones for this franchise moving forward, and both of them have realistically kind of flamed out. Chicago has not done a really great job at drafting players well. You could also blame it on the players and their type of work ethic and their inability to really develop. You could blame it on the fact with injuries. There was that slate that the Chicago Bulls had where they had a combination of guys like DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball and whatnot. But especially not having Lonzo Ball within that lineup for what was it, like the 2 years that he was out with that catastrophic knee injury definitely derailed them as well. So overall, I don't think that all of the blame should be put directly onto Billy Donovan. I think that this was a difficult situation for him to come into, a difficult situation for him to overall handle. And because of some of the outside things that happened with, the lack of draft talent that you brought in, with some of the injuries that happened, ultimately, I just don't think that it was realistically the right fit for a playoff or championship caliber type coach for Billy Donovan to realistically go into and fix right away. He's definitely going to get another big time NBA opportunity within the NBA. There's probably going to be a plethora of head coaching vacancies coming up that he's probably going to fill in. He's talked about the prospect of him also going back to college basketball, where he had a very, very successful and storied career with the Florida Gators. This could go in any direction. So Billy Donovan isn't done. He's not a really bad head coach. I just think that this was a really, really bad situation that was sort of mishandled in his tenure in Chicago. But now, with that being said, moving forward into this, Chicago has some massive decisions to make. They have to hire a new head coach. And like I said, they now have possibly 2 top 16 draft picks for this year's NBA draft, where they could potentially set themselves up with, 2 solid cornerstone pieces for probably the next 5 to 10 years of their franchise's history. They have to make this decision right. They have to hire a solid general manager. They have to hire a solid head coach, and they have to draft some solid players. If not, this is a team that could potentially continue to be within purgatory for the next 5 to 10 years, as I continue to mention. So the question is, who? Who do you hire as your next head coach? Who do you hire as your next general manager? But most importantly, who do you draft with those 2 top 16 picks? And I have a couple of ideas, at least for the head coaches and the players. I don't have a lot of big-time knowledges on like free agent general managers and whatnot that are in there, because those seem to flip-flop all the time. New names seem to be coming in, yada, yada, yada. But for head coaching and for players, here is what I have. Number 1, the big-time head coach that I would personally like to see Chicago pull off is hiring Taylor Jenkins, former head coach from the Memphis Grizzlies, who got fired midway through the season last year. That was a very, very big-time surprise firing from the Memphis Grizzlies, who were pretty much on the up and up, ever since they got Taylor Jenkins and, of course, John Morant all the way back in the 2019 NBA draft. Now, of course, there was a little bit of dissension between Jenkins, especially within the locker room. There was a little bit of a push and pull of a power grab in Memphis, especially with the relationship with John Morant and whatnot, that ended up leading to him and ending up having to step aside or be fired by the Memphis Grizzlies. But one thing that we did see with Taylor Jenkins in Memphis was his ability to develop young talent. He was able to develop players like John Morant. He was able to bring in and develop players like Santi Aldama and whatnot. Like, he has a proven history of being able to develop young talent. And when you look at the state that Chicago is in right now, it is still a universally very, very young squad. Trey Jones is very young. Josh Giddey is still very young. You have Matas Buzelis, who I mentioned. I believe Isaac Okoro is still like 26, 27 years old. There's still a lot of young pieces that you can look to develop. They're possibly not going to be giving up on Patrick Williams anytime soon to continue to develop him. So overall, Taylor Jenkins would be a nice piece to bring in to potentially develop a lot of this younger talent. But besides that, he's also been seen as a very creative offensive head coach, especially within the half court and his ability through there, which I definitely think is the direction that Chicago needs to go through, especially with some of the moves that they made prior to the trade deadline, trading off a lot of their older talent for younger scoring guards, guys like Anthony Simons and Colin Sexton, and before he was released, Jaden Ivey, which, we're not sure if Chicago is going to be retaining either Simons or Sexton throughout this offseason. My guess is that they go all in on at least one of them. My hope is that it is Anthony Simons, because I think that he's overall just the better talent and the better scorer right now. And overall, while the defensive capabilities of him might not stand up and compare to what Colin Sexton can do on the defensive end, when you have a ball handler, a playmaker like Josh Giddey, when you have a ball handler and a playmaker like Trey Jones coming off of the bench, I think that you just need to prioritize scoring. And a guy like Anthony Simons is definitely more of that, moves me a little bit more than Colin Sexton does. So you have that going within the right direction. You have the 2 draft picks coming in. So getting a more offensive-minded head coach versus a defensive head coach would personally, to me, be the best thing moving forward. The other option that I've kind of flirted with, and I know that this is probably these next 2 especially are probably a little bit more unrealistic, but that's Tom Thibodeau coming back. has a long storied history of being in Chicago, was the head coach of some of those Chicago Bulls teams that were able to make it to the playoffs. We know that he has, a pretty deep resume, especially coaching at the NBA level. Obviously, previously head coached the New York Knicks. Yes, he has had a couple of issues with his teams fizzling out towards the end of the season, especially within the playoffs. But he's also shown the ability to make it to conference finals at a bare minimum, right? That was his ceiling with both the Bulls and the Knicks. So he has the ability to take those rosters there. The question is, can he finish? And ultimately, you have another veteran head coach coming in, again, who did a really, really great job at not only developing some young talent, but also was the head coach when New York was making a lot of their moves, trading for Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and whatnot, bringing in Jalen Brunson and being able to develop him into one of the top point guards in the league. He has shown that ability as well. So having that veteran presence, that kind of no-nonsense type of mentality coming into Chicago, I think could possibly be interesting. Now, is that very realistic? Probably not, because we do know throughout Thibodeau's career, he has also had issues being a no-nonsense type stubborn guy and having issues in the locker room with players, having issues within the front office with ownership and whatnot. So has that relationship with Chicago probably soured? Possibly, and that might be a reason why they don't end up bringing him in. But I still think that if you just look at it from a talent basis, he's definitely a guy that you could introduce. There's also possibly Mark Jackson. I've talked about Mark Jackson for what seems like the last 2 or 3 years. Every single time that we come up on an NBA head coaching carousel, Mark Jackson, to me, is still probably one of the most talented head coaching candidates that you could go out and get. Yes, he has not coached at this point for about, 11 or 12 years. But let's not forget the job that he did in Golden State prior to Steve Kerr going and being there, that he pretty much set Steve Kerr up for the job that Steve Kerr ended up doing. He developed Curry. He developed Klay Thompson. He had a hand in developing guys like Draymond Green and whatnot. He set the catalyst and the foundation for those Warriors teams that ended up having a strong grip on the league for that 2010 decade that ended up netting them, I believe it was 4 NBA titles off the top of my head. Mark Jackson is the big-time reason why that Warriors team was able to build and win those NBA titles. Yes, there were some additions. Kevin Durant going there was obviously a big part of that. Steve Kerr, was able to keep that ship afloat. But ultimately, in my opinion, Steve Kerr didn't end up building that boat in the first place. That was the deal of Mark Jackson. With the experience that he has at the point guard position, being a long time, possible future Hall of Famer at that point guard spot for both the Knicks, for the Pacers and whatnot, having the guard depth that you have now with guys like Giddey and Simons and Sexton, like I mentioned, and Trey Jones, and potentially other guards coming in from the draft, that could be a good head coaching hiring as well. There's plenty of others out there. The assistant head coach for the Minnesota Timberwolves is definitely a big one going out. I believe Wes Unseld Jr., I believe is his name, has been a big-time candidate for head coaching jobs over the past couple of seasons. Mike Budenholzer is out there, so if you want to get another veteran presence, but he has also kind of fizzled out towards the end of seasons. Frank Vogel's out there. He's a little bit more defensive-minded. I wouldn't realistically trust him with that job, but that's just some of the candidates that you could expect coming in to potentially interview. But those first 3 that I mentioned, Mark Jackson, Tom Thibodeau, and Taylor Jenkins, are the main 3 that I think that Chicago should keep a very, very heavy eye in. Now, for the draft picks, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because we talked a lot about this in the mock draft episodes that I've done. So if you want to hear a little bit more in-depth about that, go back to the past couple of videos that I've done. But right now, the way that the draft is working out from a standings perspective, barring any kind of lottery change where the Bulls end up, moving up in the draft, they're possibly going to have the number 9 overall pick and the number 16 overall pick in the draft. I think it's either 16 or 15. I can't remember, but I believe it's 9 and 16 off the top of my head that they're going to go ahead and have. 2 really, really great picks to have, especially in a very, very stacked draft class. And there's a million of different directions that they could go with this as well. But to me, they have to end this draft with at least 1 more guard and 1 more big. I say 1 more guard because, once again, they're probably going to be letting go either one of Simons or Sexton. There's potential for them to be letting go of both as well. To me, the perfect pick, especially at number 9 overall, if he ends up falling, is definitely Braden Burries out of Arizona. I love his physicality when it comes to his ability to play defense on the perimeter. He also does a fantastic job within transition, which, once again, when you have playmakers like Trey Jones, Josh Giddey, allowing yourself to get the rebound, get it out to those guards in transition off of an outlet, allowing them to, dribble to the middle of the field or the court, my apologies, and then getting Braden Burries out onto one of the wings in transition would definitely be very, very beneficial for their fast break offense moving forward. He can also shoot the three. And again, his physicality, his ability to go down and rebound, being a bigger guard, I think would just fit what they need as a stereotypical shooting guard at this moment. A couple of other picks that they could potentially have at number 9 would be guys like Yaxel Lendenborg out of Michigan. Hannes Steinbeck could be a pick. Nate Ament from Tennessee could definitely be a draft pick. I wouldn't like Ament because I think that he's more of your stereotypical forward that they drafted in the past, like Pat Williams, like Noah Senge, like Matas Buzelis, and he would just take too much time to overall develop a lot of the holes that he has in his game, especially offensively. Yaxel would be more of a stereotypical pick for them at number 9 overall, in my opinion, because he's more of a 5-tool type power forward that can shoot, that can handle the ball, work within the pick and roll as both the ball handler and the screen setter. He can work with on the block. He can guard both inside and outside. He just doesn't have a lot of more growth to him, but he would be somebody that you could plug in immediately right away, day one, and he could start at your power forward position. Hannes Steinbeck, a little bit more of your box power forward type guy who can, extend it a little bit more to the mid-range point, but is also, a stout defender as well. So that could work its way into. So those are some of the names that I would expect at number 9 overall. At 16, I think that's where Chicago should go all in on a center. And there's a plethora of centers that's going to be available at 16. Almost all of them are likely to be available at number 16. So Jaden Quaid's out of Kentucky, Chris Sinak Jr. out of Houston. You have Patrick Ngamba coming out of Duke. You have Ademara coming out of Michigan. All 4 of those guys, obviously all 4 introduce different skill sets. You have Jaden Quaid's, who's a big-time rim protector. You have Chris Sinak Jr., who's a little bit more offensive forward, who has some ability to potentially, shoot from the outside. You have Patrick Ngamba, who's a little bit more offensive oriented as well, but he works a lot better around the rim and is a lot more physical around the rim. And then Ademara, who obviously is just much more of a bigger guy, standing at 7'2", who could be a big-time deterrent down below for rim protection inside of the paint. So any 4 of those centers would definitely work out. And so if that ends up going within the Bulls' direction, you could possibly have a team head coached by Taylor Jenkins or Tom Thibodeau or Mark Jackson, and then you'd have Josh Giddey, you'd have Braden Burries, you'd have Anthony Simons, you'd have Matas Buzelis, Isaac Okoro in there, you'd have Pat Williams, Jalen Smith has put in a lot of good take. Like I mentioned, one of those centers, we'll just go with Jaden Quaid's at this point. You have Trey Jones coming off the bench. I don't think that I mentioned Colin Sexton's name. All of a sudden, you have a fill-out roster of 10 guys that you could realistically work with, which is a young core. And that's without them, potentially bringing back both Colin Sexton and Anthony Simons. That's without them, potentially jumping up in the NBA draft. Who knows? Maybe the NBA does jump them up and they get the number 2 or number 3 overall pick, and they're able to bring in a Cameron Boozer or an AJ DeBonsa or a Darren Peterson of that matter. The big thing here is this is a massive deal for Chicago. This is one that can set them up moving forward. And in my opinion, I don't think there's a world where they could realistically mess this up. There's just so much talent in this draft. There's so much potential on the free agent market when it comes to head coaching. This is an important offseason for Chicago, but it's one that I think is really straightforward for them, and one that I think that they could leave being very well off and successful with. So let me know what you think about all of that down below in the comment section. Who would you like to see the Bulls draft? Who would you like to see them sign as their next head coach? Leave all of that down below within the comment section, as well as, once again, subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing with your friends. I'd love to hear all of your guys' feedback. I love all of your guys' support on the previous episode, guys. Let's keep it up. Let's continue to build this brand and this community. I've been having so much fun. And without further ado, guys, I think that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week, and peace.